So I know from my own experience, if you're interested in buying a Two-Rock amp, there's loads of choices to look at. It's a very, it's a big expenditure. It's quite a scary purchase in some ways, especially a lot of people don't have access to try the amp before they buy it, and then you've got a long wait. And when it turns up 6 months or a year later, you don't want to get it wrong. So this video is really just a quick demo on a Strat between my Bloomfield Drive and my Classic Reverb Signature. Now I think for a lot of people these are the two amps they're looking at. I mean, if you're a major John Mayer fan, for example, you might be looking at the traditional Clean or the Classic Reverb Signature. If you're looking for something quite different, then the Bloomfield Drive might fit the bill more for you. It's not so much a Fender style amp, vintage Fender style amp, whilst it's still that, it would most fit in that category. It's got its own thing. It's less sort of an homage to a vintage amp. The Classic Reverb Signature is more of those Fender sounds, the super reverbs and things like that, just on steroids. So they're quite different. At the same time, in the whole realm of amps, they're quite similar. So it's a difficult choice to make. What I've done in this video is we're going from clean sound to whatever lead sound each amp has, to clean sound with a sort of Strat-based pedal, which is the String Singer, which is a tube screamer type pedal from Kingtone on the Duelist. What I want to say about this video is I decided I wanted it to sound as real as possible. Now, I always mic my videos, well, I have done for the last sort of 15, 16 months. Today, I've turned the preamp on the mics up a little bit, so it's almost peaking on the amp mics. The reason I'm doing that, it actually sounds a lot more like it does in the room. The room, the way the sound reflects, you get all these different angles of noise coming at you, and you do get some uncomfortable sounds. It's easy to make these amps sound perfect. In my case, I would just have to turn the preamps down quite a lot and then use my editing software to bring the volume up, and it would get a very beautiful, easy sound. Now, you can play like that, but you want to hear also what it sounds like when you can't play like that in a bigger situation, in a venue, whatever. So on both amps, I'm using the gain control a decent amount. I've also kept it in EQ2. I only ever use EQ2. It's the more fuller, richer sound, more output and louder. And the amps are quite different in the way that you deal with them. So the Bloomfield Drive is a 2-channel amp with a lead channel. So you've got a separate master and lead gain, but they cascade from the first gain, and you need the lead master to be quite high up to get a bigger, richer sound. With the Classic Reverb, you have 3 gain structures. At the top is the Two-Rock structure, in the middle is Matt Schofield's amps setting, and in the bottom is Black Panel Fender type amp. It's more scooped, it's less output. And then you also have a FET control, which is a type of transparent boost. So when I go into lead on that amp, I turn the gain up a bit and I use the FET, so you'll notice that. And as I said, this particular demo wasn't about making the amp sound as perfect as possible. I picked the setting that I'd already had them on when I walked in the room. You can get lost in these amps, and as well as me showing them off in other videos to their best, I want you to just hear what they like. When you just turn them on and you need to play. So I could probably have tweaked slightly better sounds, and also the mics could have been slightly lower and therefore got a slightly less visceral sound, if that makes sense. But this is what I wanted to show you guys. Hopefully it helps to answer a few more questions. Let's just go through these. Let's start with the cleans. Now, being these are American-styled amps, 6V6 on the classic Reverb, 6L6 on the Bloomfield. And I didn't mention, by the way, I've got the Bloomfield in its 50-watt setting and the classic Reverb in its 40-watt setting. These are not big saturated tones like you might get with EL34, EL84 amps. These are much more brittle. They're much more revealing in the way you play. There's less sustain between notes. If you've played a Fender amp of the sort of deluxe reverb type, then you'll know what I mean. It's that sort of feeling, except even more revealing. So it can feel sometimes like you're having to fight to get what you want out of it. Especially at lower volumes, you're going to find that there's not a lot of carryover between notes, right? You've got to work at each pick has to mean something, and so it can feel difficult when you first get the amps. You'll be blown away when you first get them, because there's a chance if you've not owned any other significantly very expensive sort of boutique amps, you're going to be blown away by the sound quality. It is incredible, but you get used to that, and then you're thinking about you know, the way you play, is the amp affecting you, or are you playing the amp? You know, which one is, who's playing what here? You can't play this like a Marshall, like a Vox. You know, my other two amps that I love are a Rift based on a Marshall amp and a Matchless based on a Vox amp, and they've got a lot more harmonic content, a lot more sustain, but that's not always what you want for everything. Anyway, bit of a ramble there. Just trying to help you make the right decision if you're looking, and if you're just interested anyway, well then this is what I think about it. Okay, now we're going to flick the Bloomfield into its lead channel, and then I'll take you through the 3 gain structures with the FET on for the classic reverb. So for me personally, this is where the Classic Reverb shines. It's got a very beautiful, clean sound. Probably overall, it's a more rounded amp than the Bloomfield. Its clean sound is different, equally as beautiful as the Bloomfield. It's a bit richer actually than the Bloomfield drives clean, but it's more stylized. You know, it does feel more like another amp. And then when you start playing around with the FET, higher gains, and all of those things, yeah, it can have some of those wilder edges. And if you can play it louder, definitely get more of a feeling like a vintage Super Reverb or other Fender amp. But one thing I would say is it's always going to be more clinical sounding than those vintage amps are. And for some people that's what they want, and for some people it's not what they want. It depends how you dial it in as well, and of course you can use all sorts of fuzzes and pedals and boosts. That's a whole other realm, not what we're talking about today. The lead channel on the Bloomfield is quite frustrating. I just get on with it some days and don't get on with it other days. One thing I would say though is the Bloomfield Driver is the best pedal platform amp that I've played. This is a 100 watt amp, which I often play at 100 watts. And with pedals, you really feel like you're getting the pedal character. So if you're really a pedal person, then the coloured tone of the Classic Reverb may not be what you want. If you're not looking for that particular vintage Fender plus Strat sort of sound, that's really what it's best for. Then the Bloomfield Driver is a more open, neutral sound with so much breadth that you can get out of it. It's pretty amazing with pedals, and often that's what I come back to it for. So, having said that, we're going to hear a pedal now. Just picked one pedal for today, the String Singer, set the same way for both pedals, for both amps, in its fat setting. So yeah, let's hear what that sounds like. I think both amps actually work really well with that pedal. For the Bloomfield, it does show, I think, how great it can sound. The double stops and the harmonic content and everything like that feels brilliant. It's so much fun. And it's more unique in many ways, because you could close your eyes with the classic reverb and think you're listening to an old Fender amp being played, and it's got more wild edges, and it's in some ways a more visceral experience. The Bloomfield is very classy. So yeah, it's not an easy decision to make. And over the months and years, year and a half I've owned these amps now, I would flick every few weeks between which one I would keep if I could only have one. Sometimes I'm in the mood for that classic reverb, you know, that real stratty sound. I could dial it in a lot different than I have now and use certain pedals, and it will get a real rounded Strat blues tone, you know. But with the Bloomfield, it's a bit more of your own soundscape, a bit more of your own blank canvas. It's less related to other things, and therefore you've got to be more creative with it, I find. So pedal platform and more unique Bloomfield, familiar and just more well-rounded classic reverb. That's what I would say, especially for a Strat. Anyway, yeah, this is the quickest video I've ever filmed. I'm going on holiday later this afternoon, and I didn't think I'd get to make a video today. I've run around like a madman. So not my best quality demos ever, but actually it's what I wanted to show you, because obviously on other channels with, you know, far more experienced players, you're going to get some incredible sounds that may not relate to the way you play, because they certainly don't to me. This is how it sounds when I play it generally. And I've, as I said, whacked up the preamps on the mics just to give you that feeling as it does in the room. Sometimes it comes back on you and it does break up in your ears more based on the room, not just on what's coming out directly from the speakers. Anyway, so let me know if you've got any questions down in the comments. And as I say at the end of every video, I'm doing a giveaway. Giving away this Dualist. This is the older one without the outside toggle switches. You have to subscribe, comment, anywhere in the world. I'll send this once I've hit 6,000 subs. All right, have a good one. Cheers.